Okay, now that we've covered that, what chain of events led up to the moment you and your cousin had your encounter?
Well, we're up there just for basic vacation. I believe it was sometime around June or July. I mean, this was quite a long time ago now. So I think it was around the 4th of July, but I'm not 100% sure. So, I mean, we had good foliage in the area and whatnot, but that's the reasoning for being at the cabin anyway. What we were doing with the forest specifically is, I mean, I suppose I can paint a better picture, though, about the cabin area is we're about a mile or two into the woods from the main highway, and it's pretty thick forest, first off, but we were playing airsoft, which is plastic BBs and whatnot. You shoot them at each other. It's like a game like paintball. We were just playing around, having fun. I mean, for background as to why I was out there, I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. We were just having fun.
Whose cabin was that?
My grandparents. Since now it has been sold, we no longer go up there.
Was it sold because of that encounter?
No, it was just financial issues. It's only been sold since 2 years ago now. Yeah, so I mean, we have been up there since the encounter.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, it's just I didn't really like going out in the woods very much up there after then. But if I did, I'd be on a four-wheeler or something. Typically, the noise of a four-wheeler spooks any animal that's out there.
I'm not sure if you're going to be willing to reveal this, but can you reveal some facts about the geographical area of that cabin, where it's located, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. It's cabin's actually on Long Lake in Danbury, Wisconsin. They might actually call it the town of Swiss as well, but I think they border each other. But it was all the way at the end of Long Lake Road, so dead at the end. So, I mean, it just goes the road right into, like, I don't know, probably at least 100 acres of forest before you hit another side of town.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the encounter itself, what kind of topography are we talking about here? Rolling hills, or is it pretty flat?
Well, it's really thick woods. I mean, it is hilly back there. We had a trail that went around as an ATV trail around the whole property. It was pretty bouncy. There was a part where you drop down in elevation about, I don't know, probably 30 feet, and then there was a pond at the bottom of the hill that you had to drive around. So it was a pretty hilly area, but where the incident occurred exactly, it was pretty flat. We were at the top of the hill, looking off into the woods, which you could see maybe 60 yards at max. It was pretty thick, which is what I'm used to hunting. Actually, I hunt up north at Mille Lacs Lake up in Minnesota, if anybody knows where that is. It's pretty thick woods up there, too, so it's pretty much the same. I mean, there's not a whole lot difference between Wisconsin and Minnesota besides sports fans.
I know what you mean there. All right, Derek, it's time to talk about your encounter. I want you to start at the top. Please tell us about it, and please give us every detail you remember.
Basically, I could start out by saying that we were, me and my cousin, we were playing around with the airsoft gun, so we were in a firefight, which is kind of goofy, shooting at each other and being stupid for being young. But the firefight took us into the woods because I don't know, I got kind of too into it back then. I dressed up in a full military BDU, head-to-toe camouflage. He was in blue jeans. So I had a little bit of an advantage once we hit the tree line. We carried our battle into the forest quite a ways. I'm guessing we were probably 100 yards in. Maybe, yeah, I think about 100 yards in. We ended up stopping. We were at the top of a hill on the furthest end of the trail, looking over. It went pretty much the wood line. It went flat, and then it dropped down into another hill, which was the field we were looking into when I actually saw the thing. But once it dropped down, it goes down to another pond. So I'm assuming that whatever it was may have come from the pond. I mean, it's a watering hole, but I don't know. I suppose I can't be 100% sure because I'm still confused as to what I saw. So we were chilling out in the woods. We had stopped our fight, which we were just kind of standing there. Basically, we're sitting at this turn in the trail at the top of the hill, and I've always been well. I mean, as a hunter, you get feel like you get kind of a sense you're always kind of on guard. So I felt like something was watching us, and I thought I had caught some movement out in the woods, which is not uncommon. I mean, there's always birds flying around. Who knows, maybe you'll see a raccoon or something. No, what spooked me was we noticed that it was dead quiet, which whenever it's dead quiet like that, it means that there's a major predator in the area, and I can't rule out that maybe it got quiet because of us, because, I mean, we're predators as well. Basically, we were talking, and I got a little paranoid because of the quiet. I noticed something moving, which, I don't know, I caught only a glimpse of it with peripheral vision at first, so it was probably about 50 meters out, 50 yards out, somewhere in that general vicinity, and it was straight out in the field before it hit the hill. I should probably describe it better. It's not really a field, it is forested, but it's less thick than most of the woods around you, so you can see through it, is the best way to put it. There are still trees and everything, so I mean, it's not like an open field. But the movement caught my eye, so I started focusing out there and looking out in that general direction, which he's confused and he's still talking, so I shushed him. So, I mean, I shushed him, and he shut up quick, and I told him we were being watched, which was mostly a joke, I thought, but I mean, you still get that feeling when you're being watched pretty much whenever you're out in the woods anyway. But I figured the movement that I initially got was probably a bird or something, so I'm just looking around like normal. But then I did notice something that was off in the woods. Remember, it is dead quiet at this point. It was probably at about 12 o'clock, because we were looking straight out when we were talking. And there was a large animal leaning against a tree. I'm sorry if I'm starting to sound a little nervous here. It's kind of making me recalling the event is bringing back some images that kind of a little terrifying to me. Anyway, though, we had both paused from talking because I got him to quiet down, which was initially a joke until I had actually noticed that there was something leaning against the tree about 50 yards out from us. Or maybe closer, I'm not 100% sure, I'm just guesstimating because it's been a long time since it happened. But the animal was very large, it was very muscular, it was pretty unlike anything else I'm used to seeing. I've seen bear and whatnot, and it just didn't match. The animal itself, it had reddish-brown fur, and it actually almost completely blended in until I managed to get a good focus on it, which I was wearing my glasses at the time, so I had pretty close to 20/20 vision. When I was focused on it, we were close enough where I could see that its fur looked pretty long, and it was, you could see individual hairs pretty well, even though it was pretty far out. But when I was focusing on it, though, I mean, I looked at it, and the first thing I noticed is it was holding on to the tree it was standing next to, and that its limbs, its front arms, they seemed unnaturally long, proportionate to the animal, which, because it was like slouching, I suppose it would make sense if it was taller than I thought it was initially, because, I mean, with how it was sitting or kneeling, it was probably 4 or 5 feet tall, but I think it was obviously because it was sitting down. If it were to stand up, I'm assuming it had to be at least 6 feet, maybe taller. But about the arms, though, I noticed that it did have formidable-looking claws, which that made me very nervous because, I mean, I've seen bear claws, which can be 2-3 inches. This looked like it matched them, at least that long, which could be deadly. Most likely is deadly to whatever herbivore animals are in the area, deer or whatever. I'm guessing this is what was hunting him. So it was standing kind of slouched down against the tree. It looked like it was trying to not be seen. It was trying to be stealthy, which would mean that it was stalking. I mean, kind of like a cougar will. They'll stay real low in the foliage and try not to be seen. But like with mountain lions and stuff, though, cats, they typically won't attack grown men. So, I mean, you don't have to worry as much about them. This thing, though, I don't know. It was staring at us, and it was panting like a dog pants. So, I mean, we could see its teeth, and it had very large teeth. Its snout did appear elongated, like a canid or possibly a bear. I'm still not sure, but I don't know. It doesn't match a bear, which is the only large animal that we have out there besides wolves. The bear in the area are black, and they don't sit like that. They don't sit on their butt or whatever and sit slouched against a tree or whatever. If it was looking at us, it would have stood upright, being a bear, and then done a charge or something. Which actually brings me to what the animal did itself, which is what got us freaked out, because, I mean, when I saw it, I don't know if my cousin saw it for sure. He was just kind of standing there looking around. I don't know if he focused on it like I was, because I was in full camo and whatnot. I'm not even sure if the animal was focused on me. I think it might have been focused on my cousin, because, I mean, the BDU camouflage tends to break up your form, so he would stand out more than I would. I mean, I'm sure it saw me, but it probably was more focused on him than myself. So I said to him, "We have to go." And I said it out loud, but kind of quietly. And because of my cousin already being kind of freaked out when I said that, he just bolted. And I kind of left me standing there like, what the heck is going on here? Because I didn't expect him to run as quickly as he did. Well, he is a baseball player, so I mean, he can run pretty quick. He can outrun me any day. So I was like, oh great, now I'm the guy left behind. Is what I was thinking.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be faster than the dog man, unfortunately.
Yeah, he just had to be faster than me. But the problem was too is I also flashed through my head too is like when you come across an animal that's hostile, typically you want to back away slowly. I mean, like with bear and whatnot, is you don't want to give them any reason to chase you. It sets in the predator instinct. If you run, they'll chase you. Which brings me to what it did, because I mean, he bolts. I looked at it for a good 3 seconds before it actually started running towards us, which when it did, it sounded like it dropped to all fours at first and then got back up to 2, which was kind of weird. But like, I don't know if it did that to get kind of a good, like, sprint going. But, I mean, at that point, I mean, when it ran, I took off. So, I mean, I lost sight of it pretty quick. But I could hear it behind us crashing through the woods. But what I'm wondering about is, like, a lot of animals will do what they call a bluff charge. And means they will... it's hard to tell the difference between a real charge and a bluff charge, though, because like a bear, you can't tell. If they start running at you, if you stand your ground, and if it's a bluff charge, they'll veer off at the last second, and they'll actually leave you alone. But considering you can't tell the difference, it's just like you might as well try to back away. But because if it isn't a bluff charge, they're going to mow you over. So that's why I was kind of wondering if that's what it did was. But I mean, I felt like the way it was looking at us, that it definitely wanted to hurt us. But, I mean, there's a chance that maybe it was just defending its territory. It might have been just a bluff charge to get us out of the area, because if the animal truly wanted to get at us, I mean, once we ran out, we got out of the tree line, it stopped following. So, at that point, I suppose it's possible that maybe its intention wasn't to hurt us, it was just to scare us and get us out of the area, is the way I look back at it now. But still, I mean, when I caught up to him after we actually got to the tree line, I still yelled to him to keep going, because, I mean, we were still within, I don't know, 10 yards of the tree line. It was still right behind me, so, I mean, I yelled, go, 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 and we got out of the tree line. We ran right to the cabin and got inside and shut the door. At which point, my grandparents were in there asking why we were looking panicked and winded. And I knew they wouldn't believe. Obviously, they're pretty old-fashioned, and they probably wouldn't even believe us if we'd said we'd seen a bear, but I mean, for whatever this thing was, I mean, I knew obviously they wouldn't believe us, so I mean, I told them that it was a bear, and my cousin nodded. I mean, this really does sum up most of what happened. It was a very short incident. I mean, it was probably maybe 30 seconds long because we got out of there pretty quick. We left it behind, and I knew that there was no way I could fight an animal like that. I was unarmed. The only thing I had was a toy gun. Didn't have my knife on me or anything. So, I mean, we got inside later that night. We discussed, me and my cousin discussed what we had seen, and we decided that it was best that we had not talk about it to anybody for a while, and that's why it had been a long time since I had actually posted this story. It's been probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years, something along those lines.
Later on that evening, Derek, was there any evidence that it was still around? Did you hear any strange sounds outside the cabin? See anything when you looked out a window? If you were brave enough to look out a window, that is.
I stayed away from windows that night, but, I mean, we did have a few of the windows open so we could hear any of the noises from outside. It sounded like the usual night. The only thing that was strange is the quiet retained. We didn't even hear frogs that night, I don't think, at all, which, I mean, we're right on a lake, and typically you always hear frogs at night. They're always croaking and whatnot. I'm sure everybody else who's listening can understand hearing that. If you've ever been to a cabin out in the middle of the woods, you always hear something at night, which crickets, anything, which it seemed like it was abnormally quiet that night. I'm going to solidify that it was bizarre. I mean, that's about it. I mean, it was a very quiet night, and I'm not used to it being that quiet. It made me uneasy. So, I mean, I think I was up until at least midnight just listening. Other than that, I mean, we didn't hear any footsteps around the cabin, nothing like that. So, I mean, nothing completely blatantly odd. It was just really dead quiet.
I'm sure it's safe to say that night neither you or your cousin got a wink of sleep, did you?
Not a whole lot. No, I was pretty tired the next morning. I stayed up until, I mean, at least midnight just listening to the noises outside, and then I think that we had stayed up and watched a movie until like 4 in the morning or something before we did finally manage to fall asleep, which we ended up getting woken up at 6 anyway for breakfast. So that wasn't fun. Kind of sucked.
The next morning after breakfast, did you and your cousin go outside and have a look around to see if you could see any footprints, or did you just stay in the cabin for most of the day?
Well, we did go outside and we did normal activities. Besides, we stayed away from the woods. We went out and we swam in the lake and everything, but the closest we got to the wood line was we had to go up to the shed to get access to a four-wheeler, which is about 10 yards from the wood line. Even going up there, we're pretty on guard, but the worst thing that happened when we got up to the shed was there was a hornet's nest on the shed, and we all got stung about 4 times. That was unfortunate. I mean, whenever you're in the woods, though, I mean, still, or even near it, we always feel like we're being watched. Fortunately, though, we don't have to deal with being up in northern Wisconsin anymore.
Did it ever occur to you when all this was going on that this thing might not be alone?
It occurred to me afterward, but at the time, I was that was the only one I'd seen. But afterward, I've been thinking, I'd done research on canids, which, I mean, I suppose I didn't really need to. I mean, I already know about wolves in the area, timber wolves, gray wolves, whatever, and they all hunt in packs for the most part, except for occasionally you get a lone wolf, which is actually regarded as more dangerous than the pack wolves. They're more likely to attack a person. When I saw this animal, I mean, I thought it looked pretty canine. So one thing that terrified me about it is if it did get a hold of me, or my cousin or whoever, the way they hunt is opposed to big cats. Like big cats, they will kill the prey immediately. They'll go for the neck or the face. They'll try to suffocate it or break its neck. Canine, like wolves, wild dogs, feral dogs, whatever, they'll tear the prey apart. They'll tear them apart, tear them to shreds. They'll even start eating while the animal's still alive. Like wolves are known to do that. They'll start eating a deer alive. So it's like if this thing acts like that, I mean, it would be horrible. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily just kill you and have any mercy. It would just start just ripping you apart, which was just, it's gruesome to think about. I mean, bear are kind of like that too, kind of like canine. They'll just start eating too, which is terrifying. But at least with the bear, they're so powerful that they've been known to decapitate an animal from a swipe. I suppose these things, because they're candid in appearance, whatever this animal was, I mean, there's a chance that maybe they hunt in packs like timber wolves or gray wolves. But at the time, I didn't really consider it. All that was going through my head was get out of here, get away from the area, get safe. Reason why I also booked for the cabin too is we used to keep a shotgun in the cabin, which unfortunately at the time we didn't have it. So, I mean, my first thought was get the gun, but the gun wasn't in existence anyway, so it's not like it would have helped anyway. It was only a 20-gauge shotgun, though, and from the previous story on here, concerning a 40-cal handgun didn't do much to whatever they had shot at the previous guests. I don't think a 20-gauge with birdshot would have done anything. I don't know. One thing, though, that I did just think of was, while running, too, is to solidify the fact that it may have just been some sort of a bluff charge. The fact that didn't follow us was this animal's fast. Just about any animal can outrun a human, so it's just like, if it really wanted to get us, it would have, is what I'm thinking now. You'd think that it could outrun us anyway. It's just like you think that it would be right on us, which it sounded like it was right behind me when we were getting out of the woods, but if it really wanted to get us, I think it would have caught up. When I think about it.
It charged you, and then it veered off into the woods, but as you were running, it was still following. I take it you were running down a trail to get back to the cabin?
Yes. It was. We were all still in the woods. I mean, I'm sorry, the way you had phrased that confused me a little bit. When we were running, we ran about 50 yards up the main ATV trail, which comes out by the shed that I had mentioned before, and that's the parking area where we would put most of our vehicles and whatnot. So, I mean, when we ran out of that trail, we ran between cars, and then, actually, let me rephrase here a little bit. We paused at the entrance of the trail, which is about, there's a fork in the trail, which goes left or right. And we paused at that fork, and that's when I told him to keep going. And then we ran out. But the whole time, it sounded like it was staying kind of in the woods off of the trail behind us, because, I mean, I could still hear it running into trees and whatnot and making a lot of racket as it was chasing. So I don't know if maybe it doesn't like open areas. I mean, who knows? You'd have to really be in the mind of the beast to know what it was thinking. Yeah, because I know that I suppose a bear probably would have just ran right onto the trail, and then we wouldn't have heard much of it at that point. But I mean, maybe this thing's smart, like a cat. It wants to stay kind of more in secluded area.
If it was off of the trail like that, trailing you in the woods, even if you would have turned around to look, you probably couldn't have seen it because of how thick those woods were, correct?
Yeah, probably not. It was pretty midsummer, so I mean, there are a lot of leaves on the trees and stuff. I mean, we might have seen trees getting bounced around, but that might have been about it at that point, because when we had ran, it was in a pretty open area where we could see, but once we took off, everything around us got a little bit thicker. It's just kind of like, I don't know, we would ATV through that open area where we had initially seen it. We had gone through there a few times. That's why we knew that there was a hill and then a pond at the bottom of the hill, which actually made me consider that, I mean, ponds are watering holes, which makes me wonder if maybe it had just come from there and was drinking and just happened to hear us walking around and talking. I don't know. I mean, there are so many variables, it's kind of hard to be certain of anything.
Are you starting to calm down a little bit, or are you still kind of wound up remembering all these details of that encounter?
I suppose a tiny bit wound up still, but I mean, I'm getting a little bit calmer because, I mean, coming to the end of the incident itself, so I mean, I don't know what, I mean, regarding remembering the incident, I mean, that was kind of a little upsetting because, I mean, this thing just did not look natural, but I mean, it did look like flesh and blood creatures. So I mean, it's just like the thing that threw me off the most, that made me the most uncomfortable, was how long its arms were. It just didn't seem right. It didn't seem proportionate. Unless the thing, when it stood up, was actually 7 feet tall, which, I mean, then I suppose it could be, but it was almost like, I don't know. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just bizarre. I mean, I'm 6'4", so I'm not exactly a small person. This thing looked like it had to have been at least my height. Yeah, well, when it was hunched over, it looked like it was maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 inches shorter than me. It could have been when it was hunched over, but I mean, it looked like if it were to stand up, it was at least my height, maybe even taller, maybe a foot taller. I'm not sure. It was something that I don't want to see again.
Oh, no one can blame you for that, that's for sure. Now, backing up, Derek, just so I get this straight, how far were you when you first saw it standing there looking at you?
It had to have been about 50 yards out, because I don't know, somewhere between 40 and 50 yards is what I'm guessing. I mean, obviously there's a give or take ratio on it, because I mean, when you're kind of freaking out at the time, you can't be too accurate with your estimates. I'm assuming. You never know what's going through your head. I mean, all I was going through my head is, what the heck is that thing? At first, and I was like, oh, that thing looks dangerous. I should get out of here. And which is, I mean, it really is the same reaction I would have had to a bear or a wolf. But, well, maybe not a bear. A bear, I would have been like, yeah, I want to get out of here. But I mean, instinct tells you, after you research a while, to back away slowly with a black bear. Chances are they'll probably leave you alone. But if they don't leave you alone, you got to stand up tall and be real loud. But this thing, I have a feeling if I would have stood my ground, it probably would have ran right through me.
Yeah, that might be a safe bet right there. Since you said that you were initially 40 to 50 yards from it, that's still a fairly good distance. I take it you weren't close enough to get a bead on what color its eyes were.
No, not really. I mean, I thought that the eyes were kind of dark, but, I mean, I wasn't really focused on the eyes. I was more focused on looking at the way its movement was. I mean, trying to judge its character, I suppose. I mean, sometimes, like with people, you can focus on their body movement, and you can tell which way they're going to run or whatever. And I was kind of trying to look at it in that sense, but, I mean, animals are unpredictable, so, I mean, I was probably being kind of dumb. Like I said, like with the arms and then its teeth too, I was focused on the claws and whatnot. I didn't really get a good look at its eyes, I don't think. I don't know, it really was a bizarre incident. Yeah, I don't know, if I had to say, I mean, I did get one glimpse of it that was semi-decent for just a few seconds, and I thought that its eyes looked pretty dark in color. I mean, dark brown, almost like a dog's eyes. I don't know. It's just, I can't really be too certain, because it was really a quick look before I took off. So,
as far as the eyes go, you said you were too far away to be able to know for sure what color its eyes were, but were you close enough to be able to see any type of emotion in its eyes?
Emotion-wise, no, I don't really think so. I think that the animal was just, I think it was really animalistic. I think it was focused. You could tell it was really focused. I don't think it was looking at me, because, I mean, we didn't make eye contact. I was staring at it for a second there, and it didn't make eye contact with me, so, which brings me back to thinking that it was probably focused on my cousin. But the one thing that I did notice that really threw me off is how muscular it was. I mean, I feel like if you were to shave that thing down, it would have had a six-pack. I mean, it looked like it was just incredibly built, like it was like a steroid freak of an animal. Whereas, like, you get a bear, and I mean, they're pretty ugly if you shave them down. I've seen a picture online before where a bear had some sort of skin disease where it lost all of its fur, and they're fat. They've got fat rolls. Just like most animals look pretty ugly shaved down. This thing, judging by the way its muscles definition was, just like It was nuts. It was very athletic.
Since you got that good of a look at it, Derek, when it stood up, you mentioned that it was up on two legs. It went down to all fours, kind of like in a sprinter's pose, and then it went back up onto two legs again. If you saw it do all that, it sounds like you got a pretty good look at its physical build. To describe the waist, how would you describe its waist? Was it a thick waist or a thin waist?
I mean, when it stood upright, I mean, I really only caught it for a second when it did that because I turned around and ran right away. What I saw was it stood upright, and then all I heard was, I didn't really see anything of it after that. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it best. All I know of it was what I heard at that point because I heard it chasing. But when it did stand upright, it looked like it was built more in its upper body than it was in its lower body. Almost had like a V shape to it. So it was like really, I don't know, it was like really muscular upper body is what it seemed like. So I mean, it seemed like it stood up and then it dropped down to all fours again and then sprinted, and then at one point, I mean, it sounded like it was charging on all fours when I was running, and then after that, it sounded like it almost was trying to match my steps, so like it was bipedal after that point. So it was like it was very quick.
If that doesn't get your adrenaline going, nothing will.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't think a roller coaster could do it for me anymore.
Yeah, I'd say so after being through something like that. Now, we've covered the waist. Let's move down to the legs. What kind of detail did you notice about its legs? Were its legs canine in appearance, or were they more primate in appearance?
When it stood up, they were bent. So, I mean, I didn't get a look at its feet or anything lower than its knee, really, because of how the ferns and stuff were built out there. So, I mean, they're pretty high. But I don't know, the way it was standing, though, it almost looked like when it stood up, it almost looked uncomfortable for it because it kept its knees bent pretty far. So, I mean, I don't know if that has something to do with the way the anatomy is of the animal, where maybe its Achilles tendon is really stretched, kind of like a canine. I can't really say for certain because, I mean, the legs it was kind of hard to see because of how thick the foliage was still. I mean, it was still nerve bushes and stuff out there, and the ferns were coming up at least like 2 feet.
If the ferns were up that high, it would make it almost impossible to tell if it had conventional knees and a leg structure like you would expect a hominid to have, or if it had true canine type back legs that have that reverse knee look to them.
Yeah, which is because of the way it was standing. That's what I was wondering about, was like the reverse knee look kind of thing. But I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, it was hard to tell because of how high the foliage was on the ground.
Between the stress you were under, the ferns being so tall, what you were faced with, no one can fault you for not sitting there and observing its leg structure. So that's totally expected. Since it was so far away from you, Derek, did you ever smell anything?
Nothing really. No, it was just the normal smells of the forest. I mean, we had wildflowers planted out in the area and everything, so, I mean, the only thing, I didn't smell anything bad at that point, but, I mean, it was just regular, the normal smells of the forest, really. Only thing I've ever smelled in the past out there is occasional skunk.
As far as weight goes, how much would you expect what you saw weighed?
Well, I mean, judging by most animals in the area, I mean, like a bear, they'll start at 350. I mean, this thing looked like if it were to stand up, like I said before, it was probably around 6 to 7 feet tall if it were standing upright, and very muscular, which muscle weighs more than fat. So if I were to guess, it would probably be somewhere between 200 to 300 pounds. I mean, probably 250. Somewhere in there. All I know is it was big. It was bigger than what I had expected to see.
That's about normal as far as weight estimates would go for one of these things. Everything that you're mentioning is pretty much in line with what I have heard.
All right, yeah. It's just definitely not something you want to come across. It's pretty scary.
How about hearing? Did you hear it make any sounds while you were in its presence?
I'm not 100% sure because, I mean, when it stood up, I can't be completely sure about it, but I thought it might have made some sort of a grunt or something, but I'm not completely sure because, I mean, had the adrenaline going and everything, and I just wanted to get out of there. But other than that, I mean, it didn't howl, I didn't hear it growl or anything, but when it was looking at us initially, though, when I first spotted it, I mean, it was panting. I could see that it was visibly panting, and it was showing its teeth, so I'm wondering if it was kind of snarling a ways out, but we just couldn't hear it, because of how far away it was.
While you were standing there before you turned to run, did you have a chance to see if it was male or female?
Honestly, I didn't bother even looking. I mean, with how furry it was, I don't know if I would have been able to tell the difference anyway. But no, I was just, my only thought was leave. So, I mean, I didn't really get a good look at it.
Did you, before you wound up packing up and leaving that cabin, did you ever find any footprints?
After that point, we didn't even bother going out and looking for them. So, I mean, I didn't have the investigator mindset at that moment because I was just like, I don't really want to go back out there and have the chance that that thing will come after me again because, I mean, if it was just doing it to say leave the area, this is my territory type thing, you don't really want to intrude on its territory a second time.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the idea of going out and trying to research these things in the field. That's right. If you know that they are there or have a suspicion they're there, it's my advice to steer clear. Don't put yourself in a situation like that you might regret later on. Now, moving on, between the two of you, you and your cousin, did the encounter affect you or your cousin in the most negative way?
Well, I mean, I think probably more over me. I think that he never talks about it. I've asked him about it, not recently, but in the past, and he prefers to keep it quiet. So, I mean, I think that he chalked it up to as if he had actually seen anything, he was just seeing things, and like he's called me nuts before for watching Bigfoot shows and stuff after the fact. So I think that he just chooses to forget about it. Just like me, though, it's just like I don't know. I'd rather be aware of a danger than unaware. I mean, people say ignorance is bliss, but it's just like I disagree.
I agree too. If something is out there like that, I definitely want to know. I don't blame you. Please tell us about the after effects of that encounter. For example, has it changed the way you act or the things you do in the woods?
Well, since then I've gotten a lot better at tracking and whatnot. I mean, for hunting and whatnot. So, I mean, like on our hunting property up north, for example, we've got cougar in the area now and wolf and whatnot. But the only reason I know about them is due to tracks. I found their tracks. So. But as for like the after effects specifically from that, though, the way I look at it is most animals, if it's a normal animal, they won't attack if you're in a group of people, typically, unless they're extremely hungry. Like, I mean, a bear, they're known to do it, but like grizzlies and whatnot, but that's usually under very specific circumstances. So, I mean, like if it's a cougar or something, if you're walking with a partner, chances are they aren't going to mess with you. Wolves probably won't mess with you if you're with a group of people. So, like, if I'm going out into the woods, the only time I ever go out unarmed now is if I'm with a group of people. If I ever go out alone, I always have either my shotgun on me if I'm out doing grouse hunting or whatever, some sort of bird hunting. Or if I don't have the opportunity to have a gun, I'll carry one of my combat knives. Which, I mean, a knife probably won't help you too much against a large animal unless you get a really lucky shot on it. Now that I think about how built that thing was, though, I mean, I don't even think the shotgun would do much to it. But, I mean, loud noises tend to scare away animals, so I mean, maybe if you shoot in the air, it might back off. I don't know. But definitely, though, I never go into the woods either alone or unarmed.
Good idea. That's a very good idea. Did you have, or your cousin for that matter, have any lingering PTSD type conditions as a result of that encounter?
As for him, I don't know. He never told me about anything. As for me, I've dreamt about it a couple of times, but that's about it. I mean, mostly just being more cautious is the main effect. Sometimes those dreams are terrifying, though. Give them that.
Do you still have nightmares?
Not recently. I mean, I think I've gotten mostly over it. I won't be surprised after talking about this more that if I have something to go on. But, I mean, I had nightmares where something like the animal that I'd seen had been trying to get into a vehicle that I was driving in. Something like that. But no, most of the time you forget your dreams after you wake up. So, I mean, it's about it that I can recall.
For anyone that is considering going out into the woods unarmed, after what you have seen and know now is out there, what kind of words of wisdom would you have for someone like that?
I would say preferably don't do it. But, I mean, if you're going to go into a forested area, try to make sure that it's city park or something that's surrounded by residential areas and whatnot. Like, there are a lot of parks like that around where I live where I'm fairly comfortable going out there. I mean, I still carry a knife with me. But, like, there's a park near me where it's literally city all around it, but it's a good, like, I don't know, 20 acres of forest in the middle. So, I mean, I'm more comfortable going there, but, I mean, if you're going out of town and going to go, like, way out into a national or state forest, I would say you should probably be armed, just as a precaution. I mean, even if you don't run into a creature like this, I mean, there's always a chance you could run into a mountain lion, wolves, a bear, whatever. So, I mean, you should always be armed regardless. That's the way I look at it.
What kind of advice would you have for someone that finds themselves face to face with something like this?
That's a good question. Something like this, I think if it wants you, it's going to get you. I think that they're very territorial from what I have seen. So, I guess is try to get away from whatever it's defending. I mean, if it's defending its territory, if it's looking at you as food, just hope and pray that you can get away from it. Who knows? Maybe climbing a tree will help you. I don't know. Maybe, but I'm guessing with the way that they're built, they'll probably be right up the tree after you. I don't know if there's any advice I can give besides making sure you're armed. I mean, just to give yourself a fighting chance.
Before this encounter happened to you, what would you have said to someone that told you that they had seen one of these things? If they would have told you they had seen or encountered a dog man?
Well, I am typically skeptical about things. So, I mean, I wouldn't have laughed it off, because another thing I look at it as just about anything's possible. I mean, until you can completely disprove something, there's a possibility that it can happen. So, I mean, I would have heard him out, nodded him on or whatever, but then afterward I probably would have been like, yeah, whatever. But it's just like, until I see it for myself, I'm not going to believe it type thing. Obviously, now I have seen something that I can't explain, so, I mean, I'd have to apologize to those people.
Now you know they're out there.
The only reference I had heard previously, which it was because it was 90s type stuff, was, I mean, it had popped up once that I had seen, was the Beast of Bray Road encounter, but I was just like, oh, whatever. The girl who had the encounter was probably drinking at the party or whatever, and it was probably just a bear or whatever. But I don't know. It's something weird. I even feel awkward even referring to it as a dog man. If you've noticed, I always call it the animal.
Hitting on that idea about climbing a tree and the way they're built, something you said really stuck out with me. The arms. You mentioned how long its arms were. Have you been to my website, dogmanencounters.com or dogmanencountersradio.com, and seen my logo, the picture of that dog man?
I wasn't focused on the logo. I went onto the site to read a different story and listen to the previous broadcast, but that was about it. I can pull up the site now and look at it.
Yeah, if you can pull that up, I want you to do so and take a look at that logo and tell me how my logo, the subject in my logo, compares build-wise to what you saw that day.
I'm pulling it up right now.
All right.
Actually, very, very close. I would say pretty darn close. I don't know if I think the snout on what I had seen might have been a little bit thinner, but like the arms and stuff look pretty close.
The claws?
Yeah, the claws were long, like that, and I think that it's what I had seen. The ears were more upright, though, than the way it looks swept back like that. But then again, I mean, the way that the picture is drawn on yours, maybe because it's moving. I don't know. I can't tell. A lot of dogs, like German Shepherds and whatnot, they'll put their ears up and they're listening too. So, I mean, that could be why it was doing that. Just out of that, too. I mean, it could be it was listening to us while we were talking. That could be why it had its ears up that way.
You saw it move its ears into the perked up position?
Well, they were already in the perked up position when I saw it. That's just one reason why I was thinking maybe that could be why they were up like that. It was probably listening.
How would you describe its ears?
They're pointy. They're probably a good 2-3 inches long. Almost kind of like the way like a German Shepherd with cropped ears looks, or a wolf, for that matter.
Now, you said the dog man that's on my logo on my websites, it is close to looking like what you saw, but if you compared what you saw to the avatar on my Facebook page, how would that avatar compare to what you saw that day?
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and honestly, it's kind of giving me anxiety because I think that that's pretty darn accurate. The way that its muscle build is, the ears might be a little bit longer than what I think I had seen, but the way that it's built is, it looks almost exactly. I mean, it's got, I think maybe its arms might be a little bit shorter, but it's massively muscular, and it's the closest thing that I think I've seen so far out of any other pictures. It really is a terrifying avatar.
Yes, it is. For any of the listeners that want to see the picture that Derek is referring to right now, if you visit my Facebook page, if you do a search for Dogman Encounters on Facebook, you'll see my avatar at the top of the page. It's a picture of a dog man that's facing you. It's kind of a black and white, fairly small picture. That's what he's referring to when he says that what he saw pretty closely resembles the subject in that picture. All right, Derek, it's time to wrap up the show. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I suppose just as a general outdoorsman, I'd just say be safe. Know your environment. Do research before you go out into the forest. Know what could possibly lurk out there. I mean, as for these things, I mean, there's not a whole lot of research that you're going to be able to do to find them, I suppose. I mean, it seems like they're all over the Midwest for the most part. So just always be safe, and if you have the opportunity to be armed, do so.
Sounds like really good advice. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing all the details of this encounter. I hate the idea that it is bringing up bad memories, but I think it does serve a good purpose. So, again, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. I'm glad to to share it again. I mean, the first post I did was on a website, I don't know, like 9 months ago. And that's the first time I had ever talked about it since it actually occurred.
Well, for a lot of people, I think talking is therapy, so I hope that this will help you at least in some way.
Yeah, hopefully. I just hope I don't come across one again, and if I do, I mean, as much as I dislike needlessly killing an animal, I mean, if I'm armed, I will try to bring it down, and hopefully it will be some sort of proof for scientific community.
I hope it never comes to that. I hope you never do run into one of these things again.
I don't know. This thing it seemed threatening, though. So, I mean, I suppose that would be the only reason why I would shoot at it, though. Yeah, they're terrifying.
Well, thanks again, Derek, for your time. I really appreciate you coming on. You've been an absolute blast to talk to.
Yep, you as well. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks. Bye. Episode 10. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, dogmen. What is it about walking past a window at night when you've forgotten and left the drapes open? It's all in your imagination. There's not going to be anything out there in the darkness staring back at you. Or is there? Our guest tonight is Wade Parker. When Wade was 13, he had a terrifying encounter with a dog man. He's here tonight to share the details of that encounter with you. I guarantee it's an encounter you're not going to forget. And I also guarantee that you're not going to forget to shut those drapes after you hear this one. Wade, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Vic. It's good to be here.
Let's jump right into it. You've got a really good encounter to share tonight with the listeners. Before we get into that, could you give the listeners a brief bio on yourself?
My name is Wade. I'm 51 years old. I live here in Chandler, Texas. Originally, I'm from southern Illinois, a very extreme southern tip, right across the river from Paducah, Kentucky, which is about as south in Illinois as you can go. I guess I've been here in Texas about 25 years now. My encounter that I'm about to tell you about happened in southern Illinois in approximately 76, I believe.
When this encounter happened, Wade, I realized you were only 13. But
Correct.
before that, did you believe in Bigfoot and things like that?
I was certainly open to the possibility of, say, Bigfoot. Back then, there was not the information available that there is now, obviously. I do distinctly remember reading a book. I want to say his name was Peter Byrne, and the book fascinated me. So I sought that out in the school library. But that was the extent of really my Bigfoot knowledge. But I never really believed in it technically. I was just hoping he did exist, just open to the possibility.
Before we listen to the details of your encounter, your family, did they have any opinions on the whole Bigfoot thing? Did they shun the idea of it being a possibility? Because we're talking about a time that was not long after the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Well, you know, that's true, time-wise. To be honest with you, I really don't know that my parents ever thought about Bigfoot. It was not something we really talked about. I had great parents. They were open-minded on almost everything. Had I sat down at the kitchen table one night and said, "Dad, is there such a thing as Bigfoot?" I feel confident that he probably would have said, "Wait, I don't know, but we don't know everything that's out there. There's a chance." And as far as if I'd have said, "Dad, I believe in Bigfoot," he would not have shunned the idea in any way. He would have just said, "Well, you're welcome to that thought." But it's not something that really came up, so I'm having to speculate on what might have been said or thought.
Since that encounter happened to you so early in your life, let's go ahead and jump into the details of that encounter early in the show here. Please give us all the details that come to mind about your encounter. I'm really looking forward to this.
All right, Vic. I was 13 years old. We lived just outside the small town of Metropolis, Illinois. Metropolis had about 7,000 people in it. I lived approximately 4 miles from town. We were out in a rural area. Most everybody that lived out by us all had a little bit of acreage. I think we had close to 30 acres. Everybody had at least 5 acres, I think, something like that. We had some woods on our property. My best friend at the time his name was Brian. He lived down about a 3-minute bike ride down the road from me. So we hung out all the time, and one night he and I decided that I'd spend the night at his house. He lived in a split-level home, which was fairly popular back then, which means it was built semi into a hillside. It had a basement that you could drive into, raise the garage doors. The basement was partially furnished. He and I were playing in the basement. And I'm guessing approximately 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Had a couple of lights on. And on the basement wall was the window which went outside. The window was, when I'm looking back on it now, I'm guessing maybe 6 feet up high on the basement wall, which would have put it at ground level outside. The window was maybe 14, 16 inches tall and a couple feet wide. So anyways, he and I were just goofing around, and I remember at one point I just saw a movement of something in the window which really caught my eye. I turned and looked at it, and I said, "Hey, Brian, you see that?" And he saw where I was looking, and he goes, "Yes." What I saw seemed to basically fill up the window, and it was the outline of the head was canine to me. It definitely had a snout, relatively long. The head in general was bigger than the average dog. It had ears in an upright position. They were pointed. And as far as the eyes, I don't recall any glowing eyes or anything like that. Looking back on it now, I remember seeing the eyes. I saw teeth, but the mouth was not open. And it was just staring at us. And I knew that that was not supposed to be there. So I would say we stared at it for 8, 10 seconds, something like that. and it tilted its head maybe 30 degrees. And then a couple seconds after it tilted its head, it started beating the window. And when it was beating on the window, it wasn't like it was trying to punch through the glass. It was more of hitting it up high and bringing the hands down. It was definitely hands. It was not a paw or anything like that. It was something that could grasp an object. And I can distinctly remember the clicking of the claws as they hit the glass. And it did it very fast. It was almost a blur. And pretty much at that point, he and I both started hollering, and we turned to the stairs, which went up into the house, and we were probably up the stairs in about 4 or 5 seconds into the living room. And his mother and father were sitting on the couch watching TV, and his dad kind of started hollering at us because we were making so much noise. We finally got him to listen and told him that there was some kind of monster outside. So he said, well, let's go take a look. So we all went out the back door, and by this time, probably a minute and a half at least had passed. And we went out into the backyard and around the side of the house, and of course there was nothing there. No, we didn't even have a flashlight to look for tracks or anything like that. But whether he believed us or not, I'm not sure. The only other thing of pertinence is near the house they had a large dog pen where 2 Irish setters were. What really struck me is these dogs barked non-stop at everything. The dogs were in the house, their house, and they were not barking, and they did not want to come out of their house. Even his dad realized that the dogs were scared of something. What did I see? Back then, I did not know. It didn't have a name. What I saw wasn't supposed to exist. Your mind works quick. When something happens to you, you can go through 1,000 thoughts in 5 seconds. And I just could not put an animal to what I saw. It looked like a big werewolf, for example. Whenever I've described the story to friends over all these years, back then the werewolves in movies and such really didn't look like what I saw. As I'm talking to you now, I remember I used to get some of the horror magazines and such, and some of the werewolves in those, drawn by artists, looked like that. But now, the Underworld movie series that's out, those werewolves look exactly like what I saw. Like I said before, in today's times, you can tell somebody that you saw Bigfoot. They may laugh at you, but there's a possibility that they'll not laugh at you. Most people seem to be kind of accepting of the fact, well, maybe there's a chance. But how do you tell somebody that you saw a werewolf? And I'm pretty confident that's what I saw. I just had no name for it until recently, last few months, I started searching the internet, and I ran across the term Dogman.